All right, so the last part of this week, I would like to talk about compound loops and give you one case study. And the case study is very similar to what you did for the last part of your week number 4 Java tutorial video, where remember the size of the arithmetic sequence is indefinite. It's actually while the last elements, the current item is still less than or equal to the maximum the user specified, then you should really keep generating the term. Right? That's what we did. And this compound loop I'm going to show to you will be somehow similar. So hopefully that can reinforce your understanding. Let's do that hopefully as quickly as possible. I know that we are running out of time, but I'll try my best to really make it still clear. Okay, primitive statement versus compound statement. This is actually from what you learned for the selection lecture. So primitive statement is simply just assignment. That's a primitive. If you actually try to put multiple primitive statements together, it will be a compound statement. In our case, it will be a for loop inside which you may have maybe a for loop statement may contain some if statements, okay, or it might contain another loop statement like a nested loop, which we'll see later. All right, and also if statement also contain loop statement, right? So these are just example over here. To when I say compound, I really mean slightly more complicated than the primitive one. All right, let's now see the case study. Okay, let's now consider this simple program over here, which will simply read in the double value from the user and also calculate the area of the circle unconditionally, right? So now we want to extend the following program in this way. We want to say we want to repeatedly prompt the user for radius value until they explicitly enter negative radius value to terminate. In which case, we cannot calculate the area anymore, and then we're simply just going to print out the error message. Okay, so as long as the user enter a valid circle radius, we're going to keep applying this formula to calculate the area and then tell them what the area is. As soon as they enter something that's negative, which means we cannot calculate anymore, we're going to exit from the loop and then print out an error. Okay, so now how can you write this console application, let's say? And if you want to write a similar pattern for your utility method to generate, for example, return a string, you'll be something similar. But I'll just focus on console application for now, just for the ideas. All right, how would you do this? I would say pause the video and you can do some exercise right away. Maybe launch Eclipse and try that. All right, I'm going to present to you 3 versions about how you can do this. And then I'll give you one caveat at the end as well. Okay, let's do this. Let me switch to my iPad over here. I'm going to give you version number 1. Okay, version number 1 is simply going to be very similar to what you did in the Java tutorial week number 4. We'll simply say as long as radius is larger than or equal to 0, we're going to keep executing the body of the loop, which is over here. Okay, so now this means we only exit from the loop and also get to this line. It's really important insight for you. All right, if we reaching this line, we already exit from the loop. And what does that mean? The consequence of that is very important. We know that we're going to stay in the loop for another iteration as long as radius larger than or equal to 0 is actually true. Meaning that when it is not the case that radius larger than or equal to 0, when it is not the case, in that case we're going to go exit from the loop and then go into this statement over here, right? Just execute it, right? So now applying the logical law about negation, we know that that's equivalent to radius strictly less than 0. So it's really important for you to see that when we get to this part over here, let me just use a slightly different color here. So when we get to this this part over here, so we know that we already exit from the loop. So that's the precise condition you should really notice. All right, and then I'm just gonna run run some trace some code together with you. So I'll excuse me, I will just do this one here. Okay, let's do this one here particularly. And then for the other 2, I'll leave as exercise for you. All right, let's say the user is going to enter 2 for the first time and then -3 for the second time, right? So let's say for 2. What's going to happen is the user is going to enter maybe 2 for the first time, and then radius is going to be 2. Okay, of course you're going to store 2.0 because of coercion, but I'm going to simplify that. Okay, so 2, And then we're going to evaluate this while state condition here. 2 larger than or equal to 0 is going to be true. That means we're going to execute this part over here, and then we're going to execute the body over here to really calculate for the very first iteration. Okay, the value is not important, but we're just going to calculate 2. Going to be 2 times 2 times 3.14, whatever the area it is. And also we're going to output the area and also enter radius value over here. Okay, and then we're going to prompt the user for another input over here. And that one there is going to be -3 over here. And the -3 is going to be stored over here. So that'll be the last line for the first iteration. Agree? And then we're going to go back to the while loop over here. And then before we decide whether we should go for a second iteration, we're going to try. So radius is currently -3. So -3 larger than or equal to 0 is going to be false, meaning that we're going to exit from the loop. Right? You can see so we're going to exit from the loop, and then we're going to go to this line over here, going to print out the error over here. So that will be the behavior for the program here. We're going to keep entering positive, non-negative value to the to calculate the circle area until the very first negative value over here. Hopefully you can see that, right? I'm going to make the program available to you, and then you can also play with them about these and also use the debugger. Okay, I'll leave that to you to see how you can do that. All right. I'm going to show you another 2 versions over here, another 2 quickly. Okay, idea will be very similar. So rather than simply just write out the Boolean condition here, larger than or equal to 0 for the radius as the state condition, I'm going to use a Boolean variable over here. Okay, version number 1 is like this. We have a Boolean variable is positive, and then we say radius larger than or equal to 0. I should have said it's non-negative, right? But you can see my point. Okay, so this is actually a Boolean variable over here, and then we are going to put the truthfulness of the Boolean variable over here. And then we want to make sure at the end of the loop we always updates. Once we have read the new radius from the user, we want to check to see whether this new radius is still larger than or equal to 0. Alright, so that's the first version. I'm going to trace it using one input together with you. Okay, what about another version here? Let's say we just got another Boolean here. We simply say is negative. You can think about this variable here is the logical opposition or negation of this one here. I'm just trying to show you different flavor. And then so this one here, radius less than 0. The other one, remember, is larger than or equal to 0, right? So now you can see we're going to stay in the loop as long as it is not the case it is negative. Previously, we're going to say we're going to stay there as long as it is positive, right? You can see the difference here, but logically, they're equivalent. Okay, as long as it's not the case that the radius from the user is negative, we're going to execute the body of the loop over here, and then we're going to read a new radius from the user, and then we're going to update to say whether this new radius over here is actually negative, right? Let's see how this works. Let me just try to show you again a similar input over here, 2 and also -3 very quickly. Okay, let's try the first this version over here. Okay, if it is 2, so that means radius is going to be 2. 2 larger than or equal to 0 is going to be true. That means it is positive is going to be true over here. So now when we check the state condition over here, is positive is going to be true. That means we're going to go for the very first iteration. We're going to do the calculation. So this will be 2 times 2 times 3.14 and etc. Right? Print out the area and prompt the user for another radius. And now the user is going to enter -3 right now. So now when they enter -3 over here, so radius will be -3. So now it's positive is going to be -3 larger than or equal to 0 is going to be false, which means this is going to be false. So now it's really important to see that when this happened, and when we go back to checking that this state condition over here, so we're going to get -3. So because we know that it's positive is already set to false, so this is positive simply just going to be false. And when the state condition is actually false, we're going to exit from the loop, and then we're going to go outside the loop and then execute this statement here, which will say error. All right, that's what happened in this version here. In the other version over here is going to be exactly equivalent, but let's see why. So what I will do is I'm going to do use let's see this color here. We're gonna use 2 and also -3. Okay. So now it's gonna be 2 over here. So now 2 less than 0 is gonna be false. It is not the case that it is negative, because 2 is actually valid, right? So now it's negative is actually false. Not the case false would be true, which means we're going to execute the body of the loop over here, and then we're going to actually calculate this, right? 2 times 2 times 3.14, print out the area and prompt the user for another input. And then we're going to read another input from the user, which will be -3. So now it will be -3 over here. So now -3 less than 0 is going to be true. Okay, and then when we actually go back to check the state condition for the second time, so it's actually true over here. Not true, right? Remember negation here. Not true is going to be false. Is going to be false. So that means we're going to exit from the loop. And then we're going to print out this error over here. So you can see the behavior is really the same. So these two versions simply just show to you, rather than simply using a conditions directly over here, larger than or equal to 0, I can actually use a Boolean variable to capture what I really need as a state condition, right? Either I say it's positive, or I can say it's not the case, it's negative. So you can study this case study carefully, right? You can use the other two inputs as well. All right, I'm going to just move on to ask you a very quick question over here. The question is, let me take the version where I got is positive over here, and then I say radius larger than or equal to 0 over here, and then the same program here. Okay, so here's my question: what if I simply delete the updates in line number 9? I simply delete this line. So let me just do it right away, and then let's see. You can tell me whether that's correct or not. I simply get rid of this line. What's going to happen? All right, assuming that you paused the video and thought about it, so this is going to result in a logical error, and a very bad one. Okay, what's going to happen is, let's see this: 2 and -3, right? Let's use the same 2 input value over here. So I'm going to say 2 first. So we're going to say 2 over here, and then it's positive. 2 larger than or equal to 0 is going to be true. So while true over here, so we're going to execute the body of the loop as before. And then you can see there's no more updates over here anymore. So that means even though we're going to read the -3 from the user, -3, in the previous case, since we're going to updates, either we update is positive, we update is negative, it's going to make sure when you go back to the while loop, the state condition will be checking the latest value for is positive or is negative, right? However, right now, since you don't have that update anymore, so somehow the is positive remain to be the value that's first set by the value of 2, input 2. Agree? All right. So let's say here we go back over here, is positive remains to be true. All right. So now if you actually go there and then you will execute again, let's say the user really say, I want to say -4, but doesn't matter because you never get a chance to really change the truthfulness for is positive anymore once it has been set to true. All right. So what's going to happen is you're simply just going to, so the console value over here, you can, I'll leave this to you. Okay. I would say try this on Eclipse for this particular example, right? I already explained to you, once you actually have the very first value that's if the first value is actually positive, in that case, is positive will allow you to enter the loop for the very first time. However, is positive is never changed again by the body of the loop, which means it will remain to be true no matter what. So in some way, you're basically stuck with the program. That means it will always ask you for some calculation value, but the radius is updated. But if the radius is actually negative, then it wouldn't really cost you to really exit from the loop. It wouldn't. All right. So that's about this question over here. Okay, you can also study that more carefully. Finally, I want to mention about conversion between for loop and while loop. There's nothing surprising. That's what I said in the tutorial video for week number 4. Let me just point it out in 30 seconds and then we are done. All right. Basically, if you got a while loop over here, let's say Boolean condition here, it would be as if you simply got a Boolean condition over here, but for other parts, it's simply just empty for the for loop. You can see over here. So for this part here and this part here, it's simply just empty, right? That's how you convert from while loop into for loop. How do you go from for loop into while loop? It's also not difficult. Let's see this. You basically got, let's say, initialization. You can simply, you got the initialization over here, and then you can simply move it out for the while loop. And then you got a state condition here, stay the same. And then you also got your increments over here. You can simply put it inside the body of the loop, maybe as a last line, if you like. All right, that's about very simple conversion between the for loop and while loop. But let me say it again. So these two loops are expressively equivalent. Expressively, or meaning that their expressive power is really equivalent. Meaning that whatever you can do by for loop, it can be done by while loop. And also whatever you can do by while loop, it can also be done by the for loop. It's just about syntactic convenience, really. But I would say, if you want to do a fixed number of iterations, it's just easier to use the syntax for the for loop. But if you want to say, under certain circumstances, I'm going to repeat certain action, it's just easier to really use the syntax to use the while loop. But you can always convert from one to the other. All right, thank you for your patience for this week. I think I'm running out of time for sure. And then that'll be about it. And then for next week, we'll start talking about arrays.